What's up, Cliff?
All right. Well, we're here for another episode of Misfit Social podcast, and I definitely have a fellow misfit sitting beside me here, Miss Jenny Gibson. She's been a friend of mine for several years now. She is an entrepreneur, attorney, hard worker, and just all around badass. So it's good to have her on the pod today.
Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And it's been, don't try to make yourself sound young. It's been almost 20 years.
I'm not trying too hard to make myself sound young. Well, we are getting older, unfortunately. I remember when our kids started West Broadway. Mm-hmm. And I've got one in college, and
mine's a senior.
Is a senior. So we're getting close. Getting close.
Oh, so law, what branch, what aspect of the law? Or do you still practice? Or?
No.
Oh, okay.
I came to the good side of the force a long time ago.
Okay.
Thank you.
And I started out, I was kind of in general business law. And to tell you the truth, I never wanted to be a lawyer.
Yeah.
When I graduated from college at Murray State, I had a finance degree. And at that time it was, and I did really well. I was at the top of my class. And in my mind, that's when the whole Wall Street thing was really rocking and everybody was making millions of dollars. Of course, most of them went to jail subsequently, so it's probably good that plan didn't work out. But, and so I remember when I graduated, I thought, oh, well, I'll be able to go to work on Wall Street, and so I sent letters to Solomon Brothers and, all the big investment banks. And I think I got a response from one that basically said, we don't even know where Murray State University is.
Oh, thank you.
So at the time, a friend of mine was, she wanted to be a lawyer, and she was going to law school at U of L. And she said, well, why don't you take the entrance exam and just see, because I really didn't know what I wanted to do, and I still don't know what I want to do. So I ended up taking it. I did fine, got accepted at U of L, and I went to law school. Mm-hmm. So I clerked for Humana when I was in law school, and really thought I was going to, go in-house with Humana. And unfortunately, about the time I was ready to take the bar, they had instituted a hiring freeze.
Oh, wow.
So I had to step back and punt, and ended up coming back here and work with a guy named Bob Moore, a lawyer.
Was he the gentleman that was mentioned in the... What's a different guy?
No, he was the pastor at the Baptist Church in Grapevine. Robin Murray's dad, Bob.
Anyway,
it's a different Bob. Similar name, but
okay, yeah. That's
But Bob was he graduated school with my mom, high school, and nice guy. And so he had just kind of a general practice, collections, that kind of jazz. And so I worked with him for a while, and then I got the call to go back to the big city. So I went back to Louisville, which for us around here, that's the big city.
Mm-hmm. What year was that when you went back?
Well, let's see. I graduated in 89. Probably around 91.
Okay. All right.
I guess, something like that. No. Around 94, probably. Okay. And so I practiced. I had a good gig. There was a gentleman who was aging, and he had a sole practice, and a very successful one. But his passion was domestic relations, which I quickly learned I don't have the stomach for, because I'm a fixer.
Yeah.
And you can't make anybody happy in a divorce situation. I mean, regardless what people say, one doesn't end up with nothing and the other one with everything. Everybody loses and everybody's mad. So, in child custody, things like that. So one thing I had done when I was in law school, so I had worked for a firm that did represented banks in large real estate transactions. And that's a highly specialized field, but it's something that captured my attention because I come from a real estate background. My parents that's what they do, and I grew up around the good, bad, and ugly of that. But this was construction and development. And so my thought was, okay, I have the opportunity. I'll go work for the bank, learn how to be the banker, and then armed with that experience, I'll go back to one of the big law firms, specialize in representing the bankers.
Yeah.
Nice.
And it was a foolproof plan, and it actually worked, and I got offers from the big ones. But lo and behold, I like banking better.
Oh.
I liked wearing the white hat, and it was just more fun. I mean, I got to go on the private jet to go look at a site in Florida.
Sure.
And give my lawyer a call. Hey, I really can't do this, but I'm not going to say so. So I need you to say so.
Yeah.
And figure it out.
Yeah.
So it was much more fun.
I mean, the education certainly helped in that role.
Every I've had this long and winding road, and it's clear I've never really. I had this wanderlust that I can't decide exactly what I want to do.
So, how long did you stay in banking? Did you not stay in it, or?
No, I was in banking until 2005.
So you worked in the commercial side?
Yeah, I was always in commercial, always in real estate. I did the last. I went to Fifth Third. I started at Bank of Louisville. And then I was recruited by Fifth Third, and I took over
funding developments,
apartment buildings, office buildings, subdivisions, power centers,
all
you
over
name it.
Kentucky.
Well, in primarily in the Louisville, Lexington, kind of in that area.
And were you living there then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and then I was enticed by one of probably my biggest developer client who had gotten himself involved in a small startup bank, and it wasn't going well. They had problems. This was about the time where you were having the crash of all these subpar loans, and everything had been overvalued, and I think that's how they had built their capital so quickly. And then once the FDIC came in and started knocking everything down, which they were doing with all banks, they got themselves in a lot of trouble. So
did they have a portfolio of foreclosure type stuff, you mean? Or what
it was close.
Okay. Not for
mostly
them. I mean,
it was,
some of their loans that were out there.
Yeah, they were all. They weren't necessarily not paying, but they were starting to be looked at very closely by the regulators. And so they started down valuing all of those loans, and that with a small bank in particular, your capital requirement, that can throw you off really fast.
Are there a lot of shoppers for those loans and those?
There used to be, not anymore.
I mean, back then, where people were looking for we'll buy your portfolio.
In fact, I think a lot of their portfolio had been purchased from another bank. And so you had some guys that were actually running the bank. My friend had kind of assembled these money guys that had the money to put into the bank. And they were depending on the operators, to
make them money.
And they were not making real prudent decisions, which was common back then.
Yeah.
So it was the Wild West. I mean,
it was the Wild West there for a while, and it all corrected.
That's one of my favorite.
It a lot of pain.
That movie, The Big Short. That's one of my favorite movies. They don't get everything quite right, but the amount of gambling that was going on.
Well, and that's a good word. It was they were gambling.
Yeah.
Isn't $4 billion, or at one point it was kind of like the bridge or the watershed between a small bank and a regional bank or whatever to a larger bank. Is that?
I couldn't tell you.
You don't know what that number is?
I don't know what that number is.
Do you know what their book of business was? What their...
I don't remember. It's been 20 years ago now. I've tried to forget.
So you didn't stay with them then?
Well, my job, I kind of took over as the kind of an acting president, because there were still some of these people that were in the bank that had caused the problem were still there for various reasons. And so I was brought in by the chairman of the board to kind of be their eyes and ears for the board and ensure that we were having proper relations with the regulators and whatever. And
So you kind of came in as a controller, really,
well,
enforcer.
everything really. You know, I kind of assumed at the end of the day, if there was a conflict between me and the guys that had already been there, I won.
Yeah.
Because I had the board. I mean, I was there for the board, basically.
Well, I would,
and they were the shareholders.
But I would have assumed that you would have won anyways,
Well,
even if...
Here's a funny story. The guy that I went to, that was my client, and he's a great friend of mine, great guy. His name is Glenn Hogan. And you may have seen signs
I've seen their
of
buildings.
Hogan.
That's in Cincinnati, maybe? Or is that...
He has building. He's a big
I
developer.
think there's a building in Cincinnati, if I'm not
And
mistaken.
Probably, yeah.
I mean, you know,
that's not
in-
that far of a
In
jump.
Henderson, you drive down
Yeah.
the street,
Yeah,
you'll see. Okay. So he was one of the country's biggest developers for Walgreens when they were on their huge push, and he was going all over the country. But at any rate, great developer, great guy, super businessman. So we had to, the FDIC was threatening a cease and desist against the bank, which would have meant we would have shut down. All their employees would have lost their jobs. I mean, it was like Armageddon for that bank. And so one of the reasons I was there was to try to help avoid that. And so I remember we had a meeting with the FDIC office in Chicago. And we took a private plane. It was maybe an 8-seater or something, a little jet, you know. And we flew to Chicago. And so we go into the FDIC office, and there's this huge oval table and all these leather chairs, this big room, and there's all these really somber looking people in there. And so we all take our respective places. And Glenn was making introductions of who we were and what our purpose was. And he gets to me and he said, and this is Jenny Thomas, which my name was Thomas back then. And he said, "She's a bitch, but she's my bitch." And I was like, oh, can I say that on here?
Of course,
Okay.
yes.
But
We can edit anything. you say.
okay. But you can, and here, you know, you're looking at all these, you know, blue suit, you know, navy
That
blue
break it down a
suit
little
dudes,
bit.
you know, and we actually were able to make them chuckle. And it was a turning point for the meeting. And I
That's
think
awesome.
really a turning point for our ability to get the bank out of trouble.
Was the
Wow.
Hogan guy, was he one of the big investors in that
Yeah.
bank? He
Yeah,
was
yeah,
a
yeah.
shareholder guy?
Oh yeah, he was.
Okay.
He was the chairman of the board, and he and mostly his buddies got together and, you know, funded this thing. I remember when I was in banking, I was always really hesitant to lend to like brain surgeons for business deals,
Because they had a set of
real
skills,
estate
but
deals.
doesn't-
That's
yeah.
right. You know, they think they can do. If they can do this really well, I mean, I can operate on somebody's brain.
Yeah.
Well, of course, I can develop a shopping center. It's like,
I don't know if that crosses over.
maybe not.
No crossover there.
Yeah. So I kind of akin Glenn to that. Although now they've done really well in a different bank, and so which they've subsequently
That's
sold.
good.
But,
I'm glad you shared that. I haven't heard half of that you shared. That's good to hear.
you'd be amazed.
Yeah. Sharing some secrets there.
But we were able, the final step is we had to recapitalize. And so we marketed the bank, and we were able to sell it to Central Bank out of Lexington. And that was their entrance into the Louisville market.
Was it just a one shop deal, or was it a multiple site bank at that time? Or
We
was
just had one building, but our building was really big and nice.
Yeah.
And new. So with that gave me an opportunity to go do something else. And at that time, interest rates were going up, banking was changing tremendously, everything was tightening up. Relationship lending to a great extent was coming to an end. You know, it was being regulated out.
Yeah.
And so anyway, decided to just check out and do something
you would
different.
go to a regional bank
Oh, yeah,
and a
yeah,
local
yeah.
bank and
Yeah.
talk to
The relationship was
Oh,
everything.
yeah, man.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they can't.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, it's just so regulated.
You know, and
now.
you had to rank your. It kind of got to where I was trained by a longtime banking professional in the business of real estate, and I felt like, in a deal, I wasn't just lending money. I was bringing value to the table and offering advice and, hey, maybe we could do it this way or, whatever. And there near the end, it started to feel like it was just, I could have been selling Xerox copiers. I could have sold, it was coming,
more
it was
sterile
coming
than relational,
sales
yeah.
in less
Yeah.
professionalism.
Yeah.
Do you think a lot of, I just wonder if a lot of lending has gone to private, angel investors and private things and buddy-to-buddy type loans, because of the frustration around that kind of regulatory madness?
I don't know, but
I think you do see, like in the angel investing, investment banking, VC, private equity, a lot of that is, those guys have the money. And they're not playing by completely different rules. They still have a set of rules that they have to play by.
It's a bit of a handshake with some lawyers behind it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but like where she's talking about, when I do banking now, it's cut and dried. It's
Look at your books and
I'm not saying that the relationship doesn't get you anything, but it, like before, it was like, hey,
got you everything,
I'm shaking
pretty
your
much.
hand,
Yeah.
and
I'm gonna pay it, and yeah.
And is there a certain way that you do accounting now that you wouldn't have had to do back in those times? To present yourself in the way that the banks want to see it.
I wouldn't say so.
No,
really.
I feel
stuff.
like I don't feel like on our end that our
I'm not
accounting.
talking about cooking books. I'm
No,
talking
that's what I'm
about.
saying. I don't think our accounting has changed that much, but on the regulatory side, it's what you have to prove to get there. Where before the banker could be like, "Hey, I'm going to give you this money," and then as that's going along, we're gonna get everything square. That's how it used to work for us. Now, when we get ready to do our renewal,
You got to lay it all on the line.
I'm serious. The stack of papers that come for me to sign is that high, and it takes. So the gentleman
Annually?
who takes every year,
Wow.
and it probably takes him. He starts working 45 days out to make sure he's cleared all the hurdles, and so he has regulations that he has to work on from the regulators that then have to pass down to me. And so year over year, like my debt ratio, different type of covenants, things that we've agreed on, all that can get out of whack.
It's no wonder people can't go to the next level. You know what I mean? In
It's tough.
business,
It's
because-
not.
Yep.
That part is not easy.
If quite frankly, and of course this will deviate, somewhat, but as a general rule, I think you have to prove that you don't need the money.
Just about.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because it's what
which is
has
crazy
been
when you
replaced.
say it like that, but-
Reputation in your community and in your, the actions of how your history, and that has been replaced by basically a requirement that this is foolproof and ain't no way it's not going to get repaid. Which whenever I borrowed money, I've always felt that I was going to repay it, and always have.
Right. But
So-
some people
sometimes
would
you
like to
can't.
say, that's the kind of person I am, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and you might, and they can pat you on the arm for that. But,
I believe you, but now sign here.
But like,
It's
so
like, give me this.
for our assessment of that, like what she's saying, I have an unrestricted personal guarantee that I have to sign, and that means
If it goes south, it's on you.
yeah, but my unrestriction, like my value, my net worth is probably 3 times what
you're asking for.
I'm
It's
borrowing.
like a no-brainer, right? For them.
But they still are like,
That's right. They
gotta
want it,
have an unrestricted
They want it to
guarantee
be a
on it.
no-brainer.
Yeah.
In the days of true corporate lending are pretty much over, unless you're a publicly traded company like him, and me. Even the small amount of money that I borrowed for my business, it was the corporation. I had everything set up, whatever. I ran the corporation. I was the operator of the business, but I had to sign everything away,
I was thinking of a friend of mine that's doing some fundraising for an IPO. They're trying to build up to be prepared for.
Yep.
And so what is that like as opposed to, traditional go down to the bank?
That's
outside
not me.
my
handshake
world.
kind
That's
of
not
stuff.
me. We'll have to get another guest on for that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting though,
Yeah.
that they can raise, millions of dollars.
Yeah.
I'm talking about,
Yeah.
over $10 million they're just on a handshake, I guess.
A lot of times, so I'll just touch on this real quick. A lot of times in the IPO world, VC or PE, if you're one of the LPs that's getting that going or the initial investor, you have guarantees of what's going to return to you before or by the time it launches. Mm-hmm. So whenever that guy's raising money, he's committing something to somebody that's pretty solid, and he's on the hook for that to a degree.
Yeah. Well, ironclad, I don't know, in that environment.
Well, if you get the right lawyer, it's always ironclad.
Might be
If I can't
bars.
get, I'll get, they'll get everything they can get. But let's get back to, so you came back to Madisonville to help your mom and dad with Bart's, right? Or just you came back in general, but that's what you landed on when you came back.
What is Bart? What's Bart?
Bart's is a restaurant that they had purchased probably 10 years prior, and had operated. My mother had basically operated it, but kind of, sort of. My dad had a health scare. Of course, I had Emma. I had my first and only child at 41 years old, and perfectly healthy. I lost weight after I gave birth. It was amazing.
Wow.
So I knew I couldn't even try to do that again because I'd get punished. And of course, when she was in middle school, I was like, yeah, okay, you are getting punished. But
The punishment waited till middle school.
yeah,
That's awesome.
for having such an easy time at my age.
Yeah.
But Emma was about 1, and my dad had a health issue that was very concerning. And my parents, while my mom had been in banking and more trust in retail banking, and my dad had been a teacher and been in the school system, all that jazz, administration for years. Their wealth has been built on real estate, residential primarily, rental, and some commercial. And so my father managed all of that, everything from mowing the yard to collecting the rent to painting the apartments when they turn. The whole thing. And so, being an only child, I guess I knew that at some point I would have to come back to Madisonville and help them or whatever. But I really wasn't prepared to do it right then. But it just, things came out, and it just seemed to be that's what needed to be done. So I came back. My husband is a very talented carpenter and one of these dudes that can just do anything.
Facts.
Yeah.
So cool.
And so, with my background, his background, we were well prepared to kind of step in. And really I thought we had some great ideas, and we made some improvements. They had a bed and breakfast operation, and so I worked on that and got them online and, all that jazz. But the day my father and my husband were in the middle of Sixth Street screaming at each other over some disagreement about how to do something, it's like, okay, this isn't going to work right now, And but that definitely, has improved. But yeah, the Bart's thing, which had, they had paid management and all that stuff. And with the restaurant business,
Pretty thin margins, yeah.
What do they say? If you want to make a small fortune in the restaurant business, you better start with a big one.
That's a fact.
Facts for sure. And so, the restaurant business, especially if you're selling booze, if you have a bar, the ways for you to get screwed are literally countless.
Really.
It's like a spaghetti strainer. Mm-hmm. I mean,
I'd love to.
where
I'd
money
love to
can
hear
go.
a little bit of that.
we're
'Cause
gonna
I think our audience would find that
Yeah,
fascinating.
that's where
just some
the-
of the big ones, like
that's where I
what would
wanna
that
get
be?
into.
What does that mean? Like in a sense of some of the ways that you can lose money through the
Well,
liquor
here's
part
an
of it.
easy example. And this is why I think most restaurants that are successful, the owner works it.
100%.
He's there. And so you get into
That's for accountability and honor and keeping everyone honest,
right.
Okay,
That's right.
Gotcha.
You go to a bar and you're talking to you buy a drink, you're talking to the bartender, give him a big tip. And then next drink you get, they'll say, I'll give you an extra shot.
This is on the house here. Yeah.
This one's on the house.
Yeah.
And before you know it, the bartender's making more than the bar
Yeah.
that night.
Yep.
because that's not the only person.
Because
That's
that's happening in
with.
the whole
And just
bar.
pouring profits away, but that's
Yeah,
coming
and it's
in
very
tips.
marginal.
Yeah.
People think, oh, if you have a bar, it's such a marginal business.
And where
Right.
that hurts is a lot of times some of your food, your margins aren't as big there. Mm-hmm. They're there.
your
because
food, your food margin's less
It's
than
like
your
a
booze.
it's a workhorse for you, because that's what people
Yeah,
are coming in.
but those
for.
are really thin.
But that's a thin.
Yeah.
So if they're giving a cocktail away or beer or whatever, that might be your biggest margin for that ticket for
Yeah.
the night.
Yeah, I mean, you
And
do
so
that
if-
20 times in an evening.
If they give
over
that
5
away,
days.
You've crushed.
it doesn't
your
matter
margins.
if they ordered a $30 steak if you're only making $2 on it.
Right.
They may have gave so for some of our bourbons that we have. I mean, in Madisonville, our town supports the Crowded House majorly, especially in our bourbon selection.
Mm-hmm.
We'll have people come in. I'm serious and drop $25 on a single bourbon. Mm-hmm. I never thought that would happen in Madisonville. Really, I didn't. But if you think about what your margin is on that, and somebody gives that away,
Oh yeah.
and they take that as their tip.
Yep.
It's good for them, but it ain't good for
No.
me.
Not
But
at all.
I
It's
jumped
not
in,
real
but
good. No, that's right.
No,
It's
that's
not
excellent.
good decision for job security.
yeah, no, it's that's
that's
not good for them.
Once they're caught,
Well, let's
yeah.
say 5 times a night, $100 times 5 days, or 7 days, that's $700
Yeah.
times 4 weeks. That's
Yeah.
$3,000. I mean,
Yeah, completely unaccounted for most of the
Right.
time.
And here's another way. Bart's was primarily a steakhouse, and I guess was probably pretty much the only.
It would have been,
steakhouse
the
at
only,
that time. And so one of their specialties was prime rib. They had great prime rib. All right, you buy a rib. I think thankfully back then the meat prices weren't quite as high, but you can imagine the amount of money you have tied up into one raw rib. Mm-hmm. That would have been for 20 dinners, let's say. At least 15. If one of those ribs walks out the back door at the end of the shift to go to somebody's picnic tomorrow, your profit,
lost your profit.
all your profit's gone off the next rib.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
so you
Yeah,
have
that's a
to
chain reaction.
It is, yeah.
Wow,
It
yeah.
has to. Your controls have to be so tight. And I'm not going to sit here and say that every person that works in food service is a bad person and steals. It's not. But it only takes one
Right.
Yeah.
To create that
to
cascade.
cause that cascade
Yeah.
effect in your profit.
What are some of the
And,
ways
and
that
the other thing is, it's very difficult sometimes.
to prove it.
If it does get systemic a little bit, it gets tough to actually find it.
Yeah.
That's where I was going.
It's
yeah.
like it
How would
takes
you track liquor?
by the-
Because both of you, just
You're probably better at that. I mean,
or how do you what measures as an owner? Do you do to try to help prevent that?
So Ashley, I
track it.
don't know if you met Ashley last night. She was the one bringing us our drink. She's our manager there, and so every at the end of every shift, every bottle is checked and accounted for.
There you go.
And so if
like it's not missing, or the status.
how
of
much
it.
liquid is in
Is
it?
in it?
Yeah.
because you have certain size pour, they're supposed to use a
Is
jigger
that a
or
measure
whatever.
or is that visual?
We do actual measurements. We use what's called the jigger. So if you see them pour it in that little measuring cup, that's not just to get the mix right in the cocktail. That's really to make sure we're not over pouring. On the money side. Now some bars that are really, really doing volume, to speed things up, they have a count system where they learn how to count, but it's a little bit more of an art. Like you would really need a true.
That's real bartenders.
Yeah, that's
real professional bartenders.
Career.
And if
career
you're watching
bartenders.
Crowded House, we do have real professional bartenders.
Sorry, I didn't mean it that way.
That's
My bad.
Chris, my business partner there. And to her point about the losing money, seriously, when he came on as our business partner,
Profits went up.
within 60 days, and he fired 2 or 3 people, and we got really close to the black really quick because of what she's saying.
That's amazing.
Mostly in the alcohol department.
That's amazing.
No, food too.
Everywhere.
Yeah, the other big one is comps.
Like
Comp that. I'm going to comp that ticket.
Oh,
because
yeah.
the customers
That
being
meal's
a little,
on us.
The meal's on us.
And what was the scenario you were about to suggest?
Well, you get somebody who has a friend that comes in all the time, and they'll comp the entire ticket, And if that's not getting checked, your POS tells you how many comps you had, how many seats you had, how many comps, what was your average ticket per person, per table. It gives you all that data. But if you're not managing it and holding somebody accountable to what those comps were, then when you do inventory, if it can get even worse, it might even get. Some systems used to allow. They don't do that
hasn't
now.
been logged.
Where
now
it was
your
deleted.
inventory's down. Yeah.
And it's like, why is the inventory off? It's like, well, we had this
Something
go
did
out and that
happen,
go
yeah.
out. So when I say it's like a spaghetti strainer, I mean, we can just sit here and talk about scenario after scenario.
There's
after
so many
scenario.
ways to just bleed money, right?
Yeah. And so to her point about the owner needing to be there, it's not that you have to be the police, because that would create a bad culture, but you have to just be involved to where you're part of the culture, and you can just understand that this, because I've went in her place numerous times and they had a great work environment, but I know by her being there, she knew exactly what was going on, on the regular, and that gets out to the culture.
How long did
and
it
staff.
take you to kind of flip that into a profitable situation?
Well,
or
actually,
what did it turn
we
out?
didn't. In what happened with us in, was it 2009?
Somewhere about there yet?
We had a horrific ice storm here. Actually, which was, I don't know if you know this, it was 100 years to the day of another ice storm.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Of the same epic proportion in the same area.
I did not know that.
Somebody found that in a history book.
Wow.
A local judge and shared it.
You had some flooding or something. Am I right with the storm? What happened with the storm?
Well, the ice storm shut us down.
Like most of the town didn't have power for like 2.5 weeks.
Yeah. Oh, it was bad.
So it was a death
Trees
blow
down
for this.
everywhere. I mean, it was a mess.
Okay.
Just a total mess. But, at that time, we were looking at different options as to what to do. Because even by then, so that would have been 2008 or so, and even like 2007, 6, they used to have, like, when they first started, the business lunch was still a thing. Mm-hmm. Where you would go with your client and you'd sit, you might even have
Especially
a beer.
a steak place.
You'd have a steak, or you'd have a big, okay. And you had an hour and a half, or whatever to have lunch. The business world is way different.
Yeah.
And that has been changing a lot. Expense accounts are down. And a lot of that's just a sign of the economy and, all sorts of things. But
The tax law changed too, which had a big impact on that. You couldn't deduct it like you used to be able to. Yeah.
So
Had a big impact.
So really, in the prices, my dad wanted to continue to hold the prices, but our costs were going up, and then in that period, you had like Applebee's open up. We're starting to see some some competition pressure in this small town that didn't in the form of chains. And I think that restaurant had always been known to be they always wanted high quality meat, high quality shrimp, high quality fish.
Where my rehearsal dinner was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, my rehearsal dinner was there.
But in my opinion, I think many of these chains have, I go to them, but in some ways, the only way I can describe it is I think they've dumbed down expectations of the American diner.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. And their costs are much lower. And of course, they have an inferior product from a quality standpoint, generally. I mean, not
make up
always,
for
but
it in volume.
That's right. And so
And we're talking about chains.
Chains.
Yeah, just want to make sure I'm
chains.
tracking. Yeah.
And so they're buying from commissaries, where they've got big volume discounts and that the local guy doesn't have. Yeah. And so, you started in a small town, especially one that's not particularly wealthy. It started to go from you go once a week on Friday to you go on Valentine's and Mother's Day or whatever, or birthdays. For the really special stuff. Because you could have the other stuff, it was cheaper and it'd be okay. But it became a special restaurant. And I even think probably Crowded House maybe went through a phase.
We did go through a phase, yeah. And we had to dumb some things down.
Yeah, you do. It's unfortunate, but you do.
And you have to decide, from a customer perspective, like you have to read your customers.
What is their expectation?
Know what they want.
You might have an expectation, but it's not necessarily your crowd.
Yeah,
right?
and when these bigger chains, like she's saying, does move the needle of expectation, you can push against it, but you need to be ready to fund it because the customer's not going to fund that.
Yeah.
And that was tough for us. I mean, I remember we were wanting to do like you guys, cut our own steaks. In fact, the fried mushrooms that are on our menu is the Bart's recipe. So there is still part of Bart's alive in Madison.
Wow. Yeah.
But we were trying to do the cut steaks, prime rib. We were flying fresh seafood in. All right, this is one of my most horrific stories. So I'm flying in fresh tuna and swordfish. Okay.
That's high-end stuff.
And that laugh. That laugh is a knowing laugh.
I'm flying that in, and I'm having Chris, my now business partner, is not a part of it. I have a chef in the front of the house. I'm meeting with them once a week. About 4 weeks in to this, we have a meeting, and he's like, my chef is like, "Hey, what do you want me to do with all this frozen fish?" And I'm like, "What frozen fish?" He's like, "Well, we get enough for about 20 plates a night." And he said, "We're only selling like 2.
So I froze it.
I said, "So, and you're just now telling me this, like right now, because why?" So figured out real quick that wasn't going to work. However, when we do fried catfish,
you
sell out.
Yeah.
So
there's a taste and
wake up
appetite
call, right?
Demand. Now, I don't like catfish.
Yeah.
I'm not saying people shouldn't like it. I'm just saying it's not my thing. So I'm like,
it's not sea bass.
no.
Chilean.
No, it's not.
Chilean, that's right. Sea
Chilean
bass.
sea bass. This is Chilean sea bass.
Which is really awesome, but you can't get it in this town.
You're right.
So as an owner, if you fall in love with, no, we have to have this.
Yeah.
That's fine. You just have to know you're going to fund your own private club.
Yeah.
Because the customer is not going to.
And that's going to eat into your profit.
Yeah. Well, there's not going to be
You're gonna
profit.
pay for it, yeah.
And so I'm like, you know what? That's not what I want to do.
Right.
So I had to put
Catfish.
my preferences to the side, and by God, put catfish
Put
on the menu.
catfish on the menu.
If that's what they want to eat. That's what we're going to give
That's
them.
what we're getting.
And I think that's pretty much where Bart's had ended up.
Yeah.
Is that my father in particular, he is a very dedicated member of this community. Now, you won't see him at the, volunteering for the nonprofit on the corner. but he does it. He really has an intense devotion for this community, and he cares for it by trying to keep up his property nice, improve, buy these. He owns a bunch of these downtown buildings, which, it's not. It's more of a labor of love than it is or big money maker.
Yeah.
I mean, because these old buildings, I mean, they're 100+ years
Yeah.
old, and
Yep.
and as we all age, we need more attention.
Yeah.
And
I need some deferred maintenance myself. Right now.
but he keeps the buildings painted and looking nice, but Bart's was one of these things that he wanted our community to have something nice.
Yeah.
And he insisted on, despite really not being the kind of guy that would operate a restaurant, he kind of had this, we call him the ideologue of the family. He has the idea, and the rest of us grunts have to figure out how to
make it
how to
happen.
realize that idea.
You don't know anything about that, do you?
No,
But when the ice storm came and we lost power, and we had just had a truck full of basically fresh meat that had come in the night before, and we basically stood to lose the entire cooler, including, I mean, there was filet mignon and prime ribs, and I mean, T-bones and ribeyes, and I mean, it was about $8,000 that it cost us that trip. And we ended up, rather than let it go bad, we called all of our great customers and
said bring a grill.
right.
Y'all come around.
And
bring your grill.
luckily it was super cold there for like the first week.
Oh,
And
that's
so
good,
we
yeah.
took everything out of the cooler, out of the walk-in. We took it to my house in the garage. And so we had all this, and me and my family, we ate beef for 10 days straight, to the point where I think it was another 6 months before I put beef in my mouth. At least a steak.
That's right.
But, I just put it out. If you can get here, come.
Man, I missed it.
Please enjoy, whatever. We had people that would bring grills and...
Oh, they really did.
Yeah,
See,
well, we had
that was a
no
good idea.
power, and they would bring charcoal grills, and we would sit in the driveway and eat filet mignon. I mean,
Sounds like
with trees cracking
Yeah.
and branches falling.
It would sound like a shotgun going
Oh, it
off
was
when some of those
horrible.
trees would break. Yeah.
It was scary. I know where our house is. We back up to about 70 acres and of wooded land, and it was terrifying to listen. That's what woke me up, was this boom, and it was the limb hitting our house. And then I was like, oh, when you wake up, you get all shaky, and so, when something like that happens and jolts you awake. And
So that was the death blow for the
it
restaurant.
was.
Your dad was like, "We're not going to do this.
No, it was me. I was like, look,
We're not coming back from
we
this."
can't. We're not. We've already lost this amount of money. You're already losing money. He was taking, they were taking money out of retirement to feed it, just to provide it to the community.
Yeah.
And I said, you just can't do this anymore. You
Yeah.
just can't do it. And let's give somebody else a shot.
Yeah.
Is
at
that the
building.
current building where you are with the other, or where was that?
So Bart's
No.
was on the main street. It's called Greens
Green
now, maybe.
Steakhouse now.
So it's
Oh,
on
it is a
main.
steakhouse.
It's on Main Street. Yeah.
Right
You've-
around the corner.
You've
from-
passed it dozens of times. You just didn't.
Yeah.
Just didn't realize.
It's where the little park is that has the mural of the house. If you recall seeing that, that is the southern wall of that building. So it's a great spot. It's probably the best space in town. I mean,
It's very nice, yeah.
it's
Yeah.
a nice space.
Yeah.
Big, open. So that's kind of how that ended. And
Yeah. Well, let's talk some nonprofit stuff a little bit. We've worked on a few things together. One of the main reasons that I'm in the building that I'm in at the Crowded House is about that time when all this was going on, you started Paint the Town, right? Mm-hmm. So Paint the Town was a program through Kentucky. No.
It started in where I saw it was in Princeton,
Okay.
Kentucky, and Greenville, Kentucky had done it too. And it was the concept of these little dying downtowns, and people getting together and paint the buildings and make things look nice.
Now, and I want
work
to say
together.
this too. You, in addition to when she says dying, like you guys come into our downtown now, and it's pretty full. I mean, there's not really hardly anything empty anymore. In that year, we probably had maybe 20%.
Oh, I remember coming here and going to your restaurant when you had first opened.
Yeah.
And it was like you guys were the anchor
We were the only
of
game
the
in
new
town.
thing that was happening.
Yeah,
So,
I shamed him into putting his money in to do that, and
Yeah.
then I basically shamed myself into saying, all
Then you
right, well, if
felt
I'm going to
bad.
make him do it, then I'll do it too.
yeah. So I interrupted you, but yeah. So we were painting all these some of these buildings.
So, we were able, I talked to the organizers in these different communities, how'd you do this, whatever, and they were able to get special pricing on paint and volunteers to paint the buildings. And the problem with a lot of these buildings, ours was more of our downtown was more of a challenge because we have taller buildings. And then these other communities. So not your average painter is going to be willing
Yeah.
to get up on a 30-foot extension ladder or more. I mean, it can be kind of dangerous. So, and it's very costly to find. Once you find somebody that can do it, it's really expensive. So, speaking of shame, I shamed my father and my husband into helping. And my dad happened to have a big hydraulic lift because he owned all these properties that were really tall. And he needed a safe way to fix them and get on roofs and whatever. So we took that lift and we painted. And we had other volunteers helped in different capacities. But most people do not want to get 30 feet.
Yeah.
40 feet in the air in a bucket.
and hand paint a little corner.
Yeah, that was my part.
Yeah, with gold
Gold paint.
Nobody's ever gonna
inlays.
see.
Yeah.
So we had and kind of, here was my philosophy on this. If you can't get the building owners to clean up their buildings, and it's out of a sense of pride, then we're going to shame you. You're going to do it because now the building next to you looks so great and yours is a real eyesore now. Because when they all look like an eyesore, nobody noticed.
Yeah.
But when you paint one and have a cool color scheme or gold leaf, and because we still had a lot of quite a few of the big old cornices and some unique details. And then lo and behold, everybody starts painting their buildings.
It's motivating.
In fact, they hired us. We had Thomas and Gibson painting for a while.
Yeah.
I was up there.
Yeah, so we did like maybe three for volunteer, and then it just kind of, it just kind of
owners picked up on
started taking off.
Yeah,
and,
started replacing their awnings. And,
Yep.
So it really changed, and the idea was to, the rent per square foot. I couldn't tell you exactly what it was back at that time before we started, but it was low. There was a lot of vacancy, and what was occupied was primarily related to the courthouse. Law, it was law offices or like government agencies, which they pay really low rent, but you don't have to do anything.
This is
for
the
them.
county seat, or
Yes,
It
this
is,
is
yeah.
the county seat.
Yeah.
And a couple of restaurants, and that was a couple greasy spoons and whatever, and there really wasn't much. So the theory was that if you build an environment where people want to be, not just where they have to be,
Yeah.
then you can start to attract a different clientele, a different renter. And so that's what we really focused on. And so Cliff was pretty much the first during that time period to buy a building that it was pretty much totally skinned over with metal. Wasn't
It was, yeah. It was a mattress place. And
What year was that again?
we probably bought it in 10 because we opened in 11.
Okay.
And it was just like, it was total retro 70s. Metal skin going vertical on the top.
And they've done that to so many
Yeah,
of them.
storefront just looked hideous, and we had no idea what we were going to get. And that's the other thing about when she mentions all these buildings is they go through iterations, and it's kind of like opening a Christmas present.
What you got?
know, you don't know what you got.
Don't know what they
A Russian
destroyed.
nesting doll.
Yeah.
Andrew did
Yeah.
the
Over there,
design on that.
new thing after new thing.
Yeah, that's right. And Andrew,
He's in Dallas now. Yeah.
the guy who did the original renderings for me on that, works with him in Dallas now.
He's doing really well.
Yeah.
His business is taking off.
But you just don't know what you're going to get. And so
Yep.
we took that off. And so we did that in 2011.
I
got
remember
the crowd.
I was across the street that I almost witnessed him be decapitated.
Oh,
right
when
there
that
on the
one
street.
went flying down and hit my legs.
We were painting the building across the street, and so I think I was up in Simone, the lift, painting, and they were across the street. And we had this big, like 3-ton hydraulic lift, and they've got this
they had
little
the nice lift, and we got some
this
janky.
little arm thing that they've
Yeah.
rented, and so I'm pretty sure you were on the sidewalk, and
Oh, I definitely
somebody-
wasn't in the air. You
Yeah.
know, I'm not getting in the
and
air.
somebody was in the air in the bucket, and there were these like 4x8 sheets of metal, thin metal skin, and they were pulling them off and just kind of dropping them.
Did he get a little airborne? Did
He
it
got
like
a little airborne, and it just went. No,
and I tried to jump and miss it, and it got me right in my shins.
Oh my goodness.
Did you have
She was
boots?
like, huh?
Did you have boots on or
Oh,
anything?
I had boots, yeah,
Oh,
so
that's
it
good.
didn't. But the concrete wasn't any less of a factor.
Yeah.
Yeah, you met with that a little bit. Huh?
I think maybe you changed your approach to
I
how
did,
to bring
But that's
those
cool.
down
I mean,
after
you
that.
guys really. I mean, and one idea, pushed on, put a little personal effort
Yeah.
in it, and the downtown is it's nice. It's
Yeah, and
it's kinda inviting.
to her credit, were you already on the historic district at that time?
Probably around that time.
Yeah, and so after I bought my building, they asked me to be on, and that was another impetus that doesn't get talked about a lot. Was the historic district went from this idea of trying to just be a protectionist
Yeah.
kind of thing on something that was dying to where
more like a chamber of commerce approach, right? Where you're
we
lifting
took
it.
where we wanted to really take
proactive.
initiative and recruit people, and it seemed like it took a long time, but really I think it actually probably caught on a lot faster than what we were realizing at the time, because by 2017 2018 things were rocking. I mean, we had
Yeah, that was really probably the heyday. My concern is that, myself included, there's not as many people that are passionate about downtown and keeping it alive.
Yeah.
And that's something that you if you're going to keep them, it's just like the buildings themselves. They require maintenance.
Yep.
And you've got to continue reinforcing in the community that this is our heart. This is our heartbeat. It's not Walmart. We can survive without Walmart. But if your downtown is dead and shuttered, the town will not survive. I mean, it is what it is. And you've seen that all across this country. And healthy communities, as a general rule, have healthy downtowns. And I'd include Louisville in that.
Yeah, for
Louisville's
sure.
downtown was dead
Yeah.
as a result of all that suburb movement,
Yeah.
and shopping malls and all that stuff. And they have spent, I'm sure, collectively, privately and publicly, billions of dollars to make downtown Louisville what it is today, which is a huge improvement
Toledo.
from what it was,
Yeah.
Toledo was
25, 30
Oh
years
my God, it was a
ago,
ghost
40
town.
years ago.
Yeah.
Because they were just starting that when I started banking.
Right.
So it's been a long time.
Yeah. Well, before we got started, I asked you if anything was off limits, and you said nothing is off limits.
Okay. What you got?
So, as a business owner in a small town, I remember you and I would say that we don't want to hear people say that can never happen in Madisonville. Like we got tired of hearing it.
My thing was, I said, I do not want to hear you say this is just Madisonville.
Okay, yeah.
This is not just Madisonville. This is whatever community it can be.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, for sure.
So we talked about things like art. So Paul's an artist. When we were doing the gallery hop downtown, that was another thing that doesn't exist anymore. So we were in the summers having gallery hop nights. So like my restaurant would still be a restaurant, but we turned it into an art gallery. So there's all these things that are a big part of life, like, bringing life to a community that we worked on that. And I'm not saying it should have been that way forever, but I'm in agreement with you. It seems like some of that has stopped.
We did the Mad City Street Market.
Yeah.
There were all I think we really, through collective efforts, you and I included, changed what was kind of a little event, first Friday or whatever of the month, might be a little band or whatever, and changed it into a really cool thing and combined vendors and we argued to get the streets blocked.
Oh my God!
And so we could serve beer, and people could actually walk around with a beer in their hand.
How big of a deal was that for a street? For a street that's not busy at all, you would think you were shutting down the 405 in California.
But the events, they had this, this beer garden concept, and beer gardens can be great, but if you're like in prison, your crime is that you're drinking a beer.
Yeah.
And you can't be out with the general population. That's kind of a backwards view, and it really cuts down on the enjoyment factor for all at an event like that. And there for a short time, we got the mayor
Which street did you shut down? The one that's in front of your place or yours?
Well,
we actually shut down a whole
Center Street.
Yeah.
We shut down Center Street from the railroad tracks down to the fire station. So 2 blocks.
We had to be a little misfitty at times, and you're probably getting the sense from her that she can tell you what she thinks, right? But we had some moments where she had to touch me and be like,
Calm down, Cliff.
She's like, we got to play with these people in the sandbox again. So let's not
cool your jet.
That was the lawyer in me slithering out.
Yeah. One thing you did that was part of the artistic movement was you had a drag show.
Oh my goodness! Yes, I did. I wasn't.
Is this the off limits part? Is this the off limits?
Yeah. Is that the best you got?
No.
Okay.
No.
Are we just warming up on the off limits?
No, I have something that I want to say in response to that, but I want to give me your opinion of like what was the town's reaction to having a drag show in Madisonville.
In just Madisonville?
Yeah, you better watch out.
Well, I think there was a little bit of pearl clutching, for sure.
Yeah.
But I didn't really care.
Like
yeah.
And Madisonville was having its first Pride celebration, I guess ever, maybe, or they had.
I would say probably ever.
Yeah. And it was a small event, as you would expect. And I wasn't being necessarily an advocate, I'm just the kind of person, you do you, I'll do me, whatever, And so they were having the event out on the parking lot, kind of back behind us, and somebody asked if I was willing to have a drag show with real performers, from, and I was like, sure, that sounds like fun, know. It was during that time, that the celebration was going on. I was like, sure. And so it really went off without a hitch. There were a lot of my regular customers that went, that were pretty conservative people by
Yeah.
nature, and
Yeah.
and I thought it went off fine. Now, unfortunately, I think there were some complaints, and that changed how the organizers were permitted to do that in the future. They were basically moved out to the park, which in my opinion was a way of just kind of putting that crowd out of sight, out of mind. I may be wrong with that. Maybe it was a far superior location. I'm sure that it was. But, that's kind of the way I feel about it. But I didn't get any blowback from it.
Yeah, because I had a couple people that would go to your restaurant before that.
Mm-hmm. And that wouldn't after.
And wouldn't after. And they were pretty conservative. And I think the pointed thing that I want to say about just customers in general is it never ceases to amaze me what people can use to say, well, I'm not coming back to that. I'm not coming back to that. And I think, in a small town, you mentioned Walmart. I wish a lot of people understood the economics more of how, not that we don't, I'm not saying we don't need Walmart or we don't need Applebee's or some of that. That's not what I'm saying. But I think sometimes people don't appreciate the small town,
what it takes to have something
hometown businesses. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're very quick to just write off. I mean, I literally, so DeFabio's was a restaurant that used to be across from me. It was an Italian restaurant, Pete and Laura DeFabio. They still have a great restaurant in Louisville if you live there. But I had somebody come in my restaurant one night, and I happened to be working the tables, and they said, "Well, you're the owner. I want to ask you, well, how come you don't have any Italian dishes on the menu?" And I was like, well, I kind of tried to soft sell it or whatever, and he just kept on. I said, well, sir, I was like, one of my favorite Italian restaurants to go to is actually right across the street. I'm like, if you want an Italian dish, maybe try Pete and Laura's. And he's like, no, I went there once 13 years ago and it was terrible, and I haven't been back. And I'm like, dude, you're gonna be that petty, like to not give people a second chance. And I guess that's my pointed question is, in that industry, it is super important, I think, for us to be giving people, whether it's our staff, the customers towards the staff, to have a lot of grace in that industry.
What's the future of downtown? What's the future? Well, I mean, downtowns across America, I think, do have an appeal. People are looking. They like that look. They like the real estate. It's nostalgic. I think there is a look. Mm-hmm. Do you feel like what's the next wave to create the interest in downtown? What is that?
Yeah,
there a ticket?
I would like to hear from Jenny on that, because Jenny, we talked a lot about Bart's and haven't talked about Big City much, but Big City was your coffee shop that you've leased that business out now, and you're kind of looking on to other things. So, how are you? So your model has changed, and you're now a property owner and leasing a business, right? Mm-hmm. So, what are you saying to that?
I don't know. I can honestly say that in our community, I'm somewhat concerned that we're going to fall back, from where we were. I think that the way these downtown districts, when they excel, it's because the community leadership makes it very clear to the community through its actions that it's really important to support this area. It's our history. It's our collective history. And, my grandfather came here, and he had family here, but he was actually born in Detroit. His father worked for the railroads and got a leg cut off, and so they moved back. They moved to Madisonville on the farm, whatever. But when I look at a building, like my dad owns the old Hopkins County Bank building, which is Bedford limestone.
For now.
Yes, I know. I hear you, but
I've heard you talk about that.
Oh, yeah. You've heard me talk about that.
It's the most fabulous space
Unbelievable.
anywhere. Really, I mean, it's just incredible. But
I see you're salivating a little bit.
yeah,
Oh, 100%,
calm down now.
Yeah.
But it also had that same kind of metal skin that had been put over it, and this is hand carved Bedford stone. I mean, but that was the time. They wanted everything sleek, in the 60s, clean and sleek. But, I can't help but the way I think about this, I look at that building, and I've done this before, and I put my hand on one of the stones, and I can visualize my grandfather as a child having his little
emotional
hand
for you.
on that. It is. And when I came back, I somewhat, because of the time I grew up in the 70s, it was my teenage years and early 80s. And I have some very fond, I kind of looked at Madisonville with rose-colored glasses after I moved to Louisville.
Yep.
My memories were somewhat rose-colored. Not that it wasn't a lie. I mean, but it was I had fond memories. And a lot of those memories had to do with Halloween window painting. Where the kids would come, the businesses would let them paint on their windows, and the families would be there, and people would drive downtown, to look at the windows and see who got the ribbons. And it sounds like a hokey, small town thing. But it was one of those memories that encouraged me to move back here after having lived in the big city. And so we have to provide our kids, if these small towns are going to survive. Yes, you have to have an economy that will support them in what their desires are. Mm-hmm. But you also need those memories. It's memories of home. I remember there were sidewalk sales when I was a little kid, and my grandmother dragging me. There was the Dollar General, not Dollar General, it's Dollar Brothers shoe store. And it was the big deal on sidewalk sale day. And, everybody'd have all their clothes out, whatever the retailers and the shoes. And there was a time, my grandmother would drag me down there and make me try all these shoes on and stuff. But, I can still, my mother accuses me of forgetting everything. But I do remember that. When I was 5, 6 years old and walking hand in hand with my grandmother in downtown Madisonville. And I became concerned, and that's really one of the main reasons that I got interested in downtown revitalization, is that the younger generations, they're of the Walmart generation.
So can it be supported, from just this community? I mean, I think there's some benefit to thinking about attracting people regionally, because I'm in McKinney, Texas, if you ever go there, it's an ideal downtown. It's like lots of shops. People come there on the weekend. It's happening. Stuff for kids, you want to go eat there. It's a place to be. You've been there.
Yeah.
And I would say I know a one ladies group that comes in town, friends of my wife's, that they come there every year and they camp out in this little bed and breakfast, and every year they're coming, antique shopping. So I think attracting, the right kinds of owners in a downtown space, and creating kind of a vibe that's a throwback, kind of, you feel like you're coming into a space that's something from bygone times,
relaxing and fun and safe.
I mean, they don't build buildings like this anymore.
Right. For sure.
You go to Easton up in Columbus and you look at the outdoor space, and they've mimicked some of the European look and some of the small town America look, but it's plastic, right? If you can get those things in a downtown, because man, it's just, you got to have something to come to, right? It's like
well, we have a tourism tax, which is our restaurant tax.
Yeah, we were talking about with your mayor,
And the way I was in support of that tax when it first came out.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Does any of it go to the road?
Here we go.
To the
I'm going to get on my soapbox.
She's going to get a red meat right here. Get some red meat.
Well, I was in favor of it, whereas a lot of people weren't. I was, I fought pretty hard for it. Because again, it was during that time when we were really seeking to build our downtown, and to me, tourism can be looked at in a lot of different ways. And I know in Greenville, Kentucky, for example, their philosophy when they passed their tourism tax was that we're going to build this really cute, awesome downtown with great brick sidewalks and music playing softly through the speakers, and just create a great outdoor experience and venue for all sorts of
Is that happening?
repeated events. They've done a great job.
It worked.
And they have great concert series. I assume they still do.
And Greenville's only a town of what, 2,500
tiny.
people?
What?
Yeah, it's small.
Yeah.
I mean, it's probably big. I'd give it maybe.
So where are you guys on that? Like, do you have?
10,000 or so.
Would you have to redo your sidewalks? Would you have to do your
Well, and
streets?
some of that has been done.
Yeah.
And we were able to do some of that. I think in recent years, in my philosophy is that if you put sure, occasionally some big festival, it's fun. Yeah, it's great. As long as it's something that will really draw people, and it's something interesting and different. But you can spend legitimately a lot of your tourism dollars to improve the life of all of your residents, which still serves as an attraction for not only new residents, which we need newer, younger, with young families, whatever. Okay. And then also to encourage people to come in and say, this is really cool. I'm going to come hang out for a couple of days. And we were actually getting a lot of that. And we may still be. I'm just not in the restaurant every day. I got to talk to a lot of people like that. And they liked it because it was just, they liked Madison. It's just so cute and it's quiet and everybody's friendly.
Yeah, my wife and I were driving down through Oklahoma from Kansas, and we went by Fort Scott, Kansas, and we were just kind of cruising the road, and we were in a hurry. And we passed by that town, looked over there at what they've been doing in downtown. We're like, and we passed it, and we were going, oh, we're not in that big a hurry. You know what I mean? And we went back because you could tell something had happened. It wasn't the old forts. It was, they had been working on it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it wasn't all done. There was some, it was a little bit of a
it's a
ghost.
process for sure.
But it was, you could
fast.
tell somebody's throwing money at it. And it was pretty cool.
Yeah.
It was worth the stop.
Yeah.
And when we had the mayor on the pod, like one of the things we talked about, to her point, is $2 million a year that's coming in from
That's
that
a chunk of
restaurant
change.
tax. I mean, it's not a small amount. And so
you were thinking brick streets in front of the crowded house? Is that what you were thinking?
No. What we're saying is like a lot of that money was going towards regular events, smaller events.
Things that weren't very attractional.
Yeah, spread out to where people would come and they would hang out, and they would just mull around downtown, go to the art shops, go to the coffee shop, come to this bar, that bar, whatever.
Oh, so it's like a one and done focus now.
It's just one big event at the park.
At the park.
Yeah.
And only
So it
the
doesn't
mobile
draw.
vendors really benefit from it. I know when we would have the Friday night events, I mean, you guys would be slammed. Everybody would be slammed. And
they would still have mobile.
it still had mobile
Yeah, it's not like
vendors.
You should take the mayor out to Bart's and feed him a steak. No, Bart's. No. Ply him a little
You
bit.
can buy a steak.
You can buy the steak.
But I think, yeah, I mean, in these bigger events are great, I guess, but I feel like there's a lot of people that come probably just regionally, not a whole lot that come just because of the nature of the
Right.
the acts, and not saying they're bad, but probably you're not going to drive halfway across the country, to go, but they're not left with a taste of Madisonville.
You'd like some
To
residual
say,
effect.
I'd really like to come back and just check this town out. And that's where you start making money off of events.
Mm-hmm.
They may come in for that event. Hopefully it's a draw enough where you're going to get people from out of town. So they're going to have to stay in your hotel rooms, right? And hopefully they'll stay, part of the next day. Maybe they'll go to
You
Fred
probably get a
House
lot
for
of that
brunch, or
money
they'll go.
back in your actual restaurant tax or whatever that is,
Yeah.
the tourism tax. You
Yeah.
probably get a lot of it back.
That's right. And that's the beauty of that tax, is because so much of it can be funded by people that we're not just trading money in between us anymore, or the community members. We're starting to pull it from
How
outside.
far is that from downtown, that event?
Well, I mean,
What are the
in the
streets
park.
like?
You know,
between
Madisonville,
there?
yeah, sure.
Yeah, I mean, it takes 5 minutes to get
Yeah,
anywhere.
nothing's far from anywhere in Madisonville. But our thought was, and of course, a lot of people watching this will be like, "Well, of course you thought that because you own businesses in downtown." But our thought was to have regular events in downtown, pools from all corridors. So you've got people coming from the north, the south, east, west, and it's pushing them throughout your city.
Yeah, get a little more.
When you do things at
Scalable.
some of these larger places, they can just jump right off the interstate,
One and done.
one and done. And
Maybe giving it to what do they call those? Food truck that came from out of town too.
well, and I mean the food truck's okay. I mean they're still paying the tax as well. When they're here, they're filing and they're paying a restaurant.
But a lot of them aren't paying the property tax.
Well,
they're
that's
not
true, yeah.
supporting the local Girl Scout troop. They're not donating to. I don't want to hate to generalize, but your brick and mortar owners, operators. I mean, those are who, for the most part, are supporting your community. Would you not agree?
Yeah, no, I agree. And you know how it is when you have a massive event. A lot of times you have a major influx and then a major exodus. And
That's
people
it.
are just trying to get in, they're trying to get out. So you're like, hey, I'm going to clear out of this traffic a little bit before I stop somewhere. Where on some of the smaller, more controlled deals, what was happening is you get people just kind of just cascading.
So you'd have a banner
in.
night. You'd have a
Yeah,
banner night.
and everybody, not just my restaurant as a bar, but hers as a coffee shop. But you would have clothing store, like little boutiques, stay
Retailers
open at
are
night.
open.
Yeah, so yeah.
But the idea is you work on you build your district where you're going to host these types of events in such a way that is a super inviting place, and it can draw. If you have a quality events, you can draw from Evansville, Owensboro.
Sure.
I mean, people from Madisonville go to Owensboro all the time. They have I forget what it's called. Maybe it's called First Fridays or something like that.
Yep.
But of course, they're on a river, which is always an advantage. But it can happen for sure, and you can build a reputation over time of a cool place to go hang out.
Yeah.
There's there's a national trend on for people to come home.
Yeah.
It's a national trend. I mean,
Really?
it's like there's podcasts about it too. People that have abandoned careers from distant places and brought their money back to their hometown.
That seems a little bit more prevalent post-COVID.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it
there
was
was some
during
drive.
that. I
There
think
was
that
some
people
drive.
started feeling
Yeah.
that if we're going to live anywhere, why don't we live near family and
Yeah.
some of our history and some of those same feelings when you put your hand on the building.
Right. Yeah.
I think that maybe there's some solicitation that needs to happen in the downtown from some of your more wealthy people that have been historically here but are gone.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're kind of up on time. Last question. Give us a misfit that you
There's so many.
like,
that I've
respect.
thought about.
Yeah. Can be more than one. You don't have to pick just one. They can be alive, not with us anymore.
Mine are all alive,
Okay.
but trust me, I'm not campaigning. I'm not being political. I think Elon Musk is the most epic misfit
Okay.
out there.
Okay.
I mean,
Does that mean you're
super
voting for Trump?
brilliant. I don't know. I might. I think I'd vote for the coalition, but no. This has nothing to do with that recent thing. But this guy, over the years, has been he's done things that everybody says can't be done.
Well, that's a fact.
And he basically just flies the bird and says, "Hold my beer."
Yeah.
And I mean, really,
Hold my beer.
hold my beer.
Flies the bird and hold.
That ain't
hold my
nothing.
beer.
That ain't nothing. Watch this.
Yeah, but I just think, and he's not a very social type. He's very socially awkward.
Yeah, very.
And but he just keeps doing it, and he keeps getting involved in stuff that he doesn't have to. I mean, he's an uber rich dude. I mean, why would he care about censorship? I mean.
Yeah, he could be out just doing literally
He could own his
anything
own
he wanted
country
to do.
or
Yeah,
something,
yeah. Yes,
and
he
his
could.
own harem and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So I think, to me, a social misfit is somebody that goes against the grain and does stuff that they don't necessarily have to do, but what they feel, whatever their truth is, that they're going to make it happen.
It really is inspirational.
They're going to make it happen.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying they're always right or wrong, but they speak their truth. And another one, I've gotten really into podcasts now, and I like the All In podcast.
Yeah.
If you've ever watched All In,
Yeah.
And but they had Sachs.
David Sachs.
David Sachs.
Yeah.
On, and there's of course professor at Columbia University, and very intelligent guy.
Jeffrey Sachs.
Jeffrey
brother.
Sachs.
Yeah.
No, it's Jeffrey Sachs.
Yeah.
Who was,
But David Sachs is is on the pod.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But Jeff Sachs, and during COVID, when everything got shut down, and I went from being this person that I thought was totally necessary to my community to being told that I was totally unnecessary to my community. And so I had to stop, and I never had the time to listen to podcasts or to do my own, research on any global topic. I was pretty much, I just did my thing. I had my family and took care of them and took care of my business. That forced me. I had no choice but to sit down, and not being the kind of person that could just watch TV 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, I started getting into studying more of history and economics and politics and whatever. But I've really been followed Sachs a lot, and just of his great reputation.
Jeffrey Sachs, not
Jeffrey
David.
Sachs, not
Yeah.
David. Jeffrey.
Yeah.
And of his, again, he's kind of a misfit because he's very capable. Clearly, he's been a diplomat for decades and worked with foreign leaders across the globe. But he calls it like he sees it, and
Is there an example of something you're like, wow, that's pretty cool that he said, or that's kind of a topic for him?
Well, I think really he really started being public about it over the war in Ukraine. And it's just from his viewpoint, I think most people agree with him, some may not on details, but how our government and has, after the end certainly of the Cold War, how objectives have changed globally, and our role potentially in destabilizing certain, parts of the world and
benefits
and
somebody.
and the dude's got the receipts most of the time, And so
I'm not sure you'd agree with his position, but
well, and I'm just but
Yeah, I
but
don't want to
it's-
dig too deep here because we might have another podcast.
yeah, well,
Yeah,
there's
I know,
definitely
but-
we're
I mean,
already
I just-
rolling into a second one right now.
But I encourage you to listen to him. It's just really, in fact, the All In podcast, it's just been a week or so ago. It had Jeffrey, and I can't remember. He's another professor who is like, who Sachs really looks up to in kind of his mentor.
So
and
I
they
was-
have some differences of opinion. But my point is that he's breaking
on his
the
own
mold.
pathway. Yeah.
He's breaking the mold, and he's trying to
I mean, he could be wrong if he
teach
wants
his,
to.
but he's trying to teach his truth, or at least voice
Yeah.
his truth.
Yeah.
And so
I always appreciate scholarship, though,
Yeah.
and I love the tension of a conversation.
yeah, me
it's
too.
great.
I don't always agree, but I
Right.
respect it.
Does the
you know?
All In? Do they give him a nod, or are they?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
well, but I mean, you have to remember the All In is very diverse, so they're gonna agree and disagree. So I was actually at the All In Summit in LA whenever they spoke together on the
Wasn't it a good conversation?
Oh, it was
though?
awesome. Yeah.
I mean, and it's just they,
Oh, that
they
guy
just
was there
talk
too?
about issues.
Yeah,
and,
both of them that she's talking
Yeah.
about
Oh,
over
okay.
there.
yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so, but anyway, I really have a lot of respect for these guys that just, and
Yeah.
they get in trouble for it,
Yeah.
or for pursuing what they feel that their mission is, and,
Yeah.
and so I've kind of always been that same way. You
Yeah.
know, I don't have a big 401k account because I kept bouncing around all these years, but
But you've
it's been a hell of a ride.
definitely been a misfit.
I've definitely been a misfit.
Yeah. Well,
Sure.
Jenny, it's been good to have you on the pod.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Thanks for being
It's been
here.
fun, guys.
Listeners, that's been another episode of Misfit Social Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Let's go.
What's the matter with misfits? That's where we fit.